So there are a bunch of really good books about building and sticking to habits, and they've all got different names for kind of similar systems. But maybe you've read one or two of them and you've tried building habits of your own, only to find that they don't always stick. Well, I've read all of those books, and I've spent the last few years building a bunch of good habits and then failing to build a bunch of other ones. And I think there's one key thing that most people overlook when they're building new habits, that all of these books kind of mention, but don't really prioritise. And so in this video, I'm going to talk about what that thing is and how you can fit it together with all the great advice that's in these books and the current best practice on habit formation. And we're going to start with the action motivation curve. So a few years ago, I decided I wanted to get better at drawing, and I was really diligent about it. I set a time to do it every day, I had a couple of exercises that I was practicing consistently, and I got up to a 100-day streak where I drew every single day. But then I just kind of lost the habit, and I haven't really seriously tried to improve at drawing for a few years. And to understand why, I think it's helpful to look at how BJ Fogg, who's the founder and designer of the Stanford Behavior Lab, as well as the author of Tiny Habits, talks about habit formation. Fogg says that you can plot almost any behavior you're going to perform onto a graph, where your motivation to do it sits on the y-axis and your ability to do it goes on the x-axis. And to form a habit, we need to keep it above this action line, which means we need to be either highly motivated to do the thing or make it very easy to do. And so most habit change systems smartly focus on the x-axis, on making good habits easier and bad habits harder. But if you're finding it impossible to stick to your habits, then the problem might be that you're not paying enough attention to the y-axis. Because when I was trying to improve at drawing, I didn't really have any reason to do it. I didn't have any end goal, or really even any short-term goals with it. Being good at drawing wasn't anything to do with who I wanted to be. It was just something I thought that would be cool. And that was enough to get me through 100 days, but it wasn't enough to get me through a consistent long-term lifestyle change. So what does that mean for forming more consistent habits? That brings us to part 2, which is the habit identity link. So if you read James Clear's Atomic Habits, two of the most memorable ideas in it are making habits small and habit stacking, or the idea of pairing a habit that you want to form with one that you already do, like brushing your teeth or whatever. And those are both really useful concepts, but there's one chapter in the book that I think a lot of people skim past, and I think that has some of the most useful stuff in it. And that one is about how habits shape your identity. So as Clear puts it, there are 3 layers of behaviour change. So the first is outcomes, which might mean losing weight or writing a book. The second layer is changing your process, which is what most of the book is about. The third, deepest layer is about changing your identity, or the way you see yourself and the world. And the thing is, it's your identity that really makes your habits stick. So for instance, I think of myself as a guy who values being in shape, and I really want to keep up with my son at a whole bunch of sports and like games until he gets a lot older, and so I go to the gym and run a lot. And I've also got this kind of self-image as a lifelong learner, which really helps me with taking up new projects and learning new things. And as Clear puts it, every action you take is a vote for the sort of person you want to become. So the way Clear suggests you shape your identity is to first decide on the sort of person you want to be, and then prove it to yourself with small wins. But from experience, I think there's a more powerful way to do this, which is to clarify your goals, which allows you to design habits that will lead directly towards those goals. And there's a really simple exercise to do this, which just involves answering a few questions. And I would recommend writing your answers to these down so you can see them regularly. Why am I learning the thing? What would being able to do the thing unlock for me? What would I miss out on if I never learned the thing? What are my key priorities when I'm learning the thing? And therefore, finally, what are the key goals that I can set myself for progressing in the thing? So for me, I learned the piano because I really wanted to be able to play an instrument, but also because I wanted to show my son that you can learn anything at any age and improve your life by learning stuff. And I didn't want to miss out on the experience of learning to play an instrument. And so my key priorities were pretty clear. I didn't want to learn the most difficult stuff in the classical repertoire or make a living from playing piano. I just wanted to play a few songs that I thought were cool, and I had a list of those that got me started. But on its own, that would not have been enough to build a strong habit. And to explain why, we need to check in with this graph again for part 3, reducing friction. So pretty much every bit of advice on habits recommends starting small, like aiming to do 5 press-ups instead of a full workout, or tidy up for 2 minutes instead of cleaning the whole house or whatever. But here's the thing, you can plan to do that and still not do the thing, because somewhere there's too much friction. Something is making the habit hard to do, even if it's small. And so the way to reduce friction is what BJ Fogg calls the discovery question, or what is making this habit hard to do. So for instance, the reason Marie Kondo became so well known as a cleaning expert isn't because she motivated people to clean, it's because she simplified the process of cleaning into a series of steps that are easy for everyone to perform. And so the process is basically put things where they belong, and if there isn't an obvious place they belong, either decide on a place for them or get rid of them. So one simple way to reduce friction is to just make the task really clear, which means not just planning what you're going to do, but how you're going to do it, and sometimes even when and where. And so the simplest way to reduce friction is to use the period when you're feeling really motivated, maybe after you've looked at your list of questions, to decide on all these things and make a really clear plan for what you're going to do. And so for an example of this in action, we need to move on to the final stage, or putting it all together. So how would I approach building the habit of learning to draw if I wanted to do it today? Well, first I'd answer the questions I mentioned in part 2, so I had a strong reason to build a habit and something to refer back to over time. Then I'd set some really clear, specific goals that went beyond just learn to draw. Like learn to draw the kind of pictures I can use to teach my 7-year-old interesting things, or even maybe illustrate a little book or a comic. Then I would look for the specific habits that would get me closer to those goals, like learning perspective so I could draw buildings, or learning to draw the kind of action that makes comics really cool. That would also mean I could ignore a lot of traditional drawing because I'm not that interested in figure or landscape drawing right now. Because I think this is really what helps habits stick. If every time you perform the habit you know it's getting you a tiny bit closer to the life you want, it creates an association in the brain that's its own form of reward. So these days, whenever I build a new habit, the process goes like this. First, I sit down and work out why I want to build the habit and how it will benefit me as much as possible for the rest of my life. I get as specific as I can about what elements of the habit will allow me to do this and which ones I don't need to focus on as much. Then I break that down into a simple exercise or two that I can practice every day to get better at those specific skills. And then finally, I plan the triggers that will lead me to doing those exercises and work out how to make sure I have any resources I might need when those triggers kick in. And that's something I'm definitely going to be doing over the next year when I carry on with a habit that I've been building for the last month. And if you want to know what that is, then there are a couple of clues in this video. But if you haven't worked it out yet, just hit the subscribe button and you'll be the first to find out. Thanks for watching.